Hello everyone, this is Bill Griffin. Welcome to the Different Take podcast. If you like this content, please subscribe, like, share. I really appreciate you watching episodes every Tuesday and Thursday. Today I want to talk about free speech. This has been talked about ad infinitum forever. United States is a country that has free speech, and there's always a debate about free speech, and it generally revolves around what speech is acceptable under when they're employed, during their employment. For many generations, or at least during my lifetime, free speech was respected as in the courts protected free speech, of course, because politically, our political leaders, there's a check on our political leaders, and our political leaders rulers couldn't use the law to squelch speech that they didn't like. So in recent years, the spirit of, setting the law aside, the spirit of observing someone's right to say something that people don't agree with or that they think is inappropriate or stupid or whatever adjective they want to put on it, is to eliminate them as much as possible and eliminate their speech. So the most famous incident, of course, is with Donald Trump. So Donald Trump was kicked off of Twitter. And this is a platform that has just come out called Truth Social that Donald Trump is affiliated with somehow. I'm not really sure how. So when you go to their website, this is what you see. Follow the truth. Truth Social is America's big tent social media platform that encourages an open, free, and honest global conversation without discriminating against political ideology. Sounds like a pretty good concept. That is not the philosophy that Twitter, for example, has. So the idea that Twitter bans Donald Trump, kicks him off, is what I think is potentially a huge backfire. The object of preventing Donald Trump from speaking was clearly to assist the administration in charge. There's no other rationale for it. No matter what they say, that's the rationale, and that's certainly going to be the perception, no matter what the stated rationale is. So the backfire, have you ever heard absence makes the heart grow fonder? Well, in this case, removing Donald Trump, and a lot of people didn't like his tweets and maybe did not vote for him just solely on that basis. Well, maybe if Donald Trump decides to run for office this period of time where he's not tweeting, maybe that is an advantage for him, and that actually Twitter actually did him a favor. So if you believe that the tweeting hurt Donald Trump, well, can't tweet. Those people that are not going to see these tweets, maybe they decide to vote for Donald Trump, and especially considering who his opponent will be or might be. So if it's true that the tweets hurt Donald Trump, then Twitter maybe did him a favor. Free speech refers to political speech primarily. You're not talking about people, not everyone has a right to say whatever they think or feel at any, there are some restrictions. Criminal restrictions would be trying to incite violence or what's called fighting words. I won't get into all that, but there's civil restrictions on free speech. For example, libel or defamation. The idea that our culture now, our woke culture, the idea is to squelch speech and have protest, and to not only prevent the person from having the right to speak about things that they don't like, they also infringe upon the right of the listeners to hear that side of the argument, even if they disagree with it. Many times we want to hear an opposing argument so that we understand better it might reinforce our position on on whatever the matter is. There's also, in terms of your employment, your employer, you don't get to say whatever you want, whenever you want, wherever you want. If there may be restrictions in terms of your employment. You can say those things, but you might get fired. It's kind of obvious. You couldn't broadcast a baseball game and then just start talking about something that isn't pertinent to the game and that offends a lot of people. Your employer would fire you. There's many examples of this. So I got some video clips I'd like to share. This is from a channel called Big Think, and the title is What Are the Limits of Free Speech? And the clip I'm about to show you is Michael Shermer.
We are wrong about so much of what we believe that the only way to find out if you're on the right track or you've gone off the rails is to actually talk to other people. Even if you're completely right, by listening to what somebody else says, you have an opportunity to strengthen your own position. As John Stuart Mill said in his foundational text, 1859, on liberty, he who knows only his own position doesn't even know that. So, for example, most of my students that I teach they're pretty liberal. They're pro-choice on the abortion issue. But when I ask them to articulate the pro-life position, which, over half of Americans take, they mostly can't do it. So I tell them that you don't really understand pro-choice arguments if you don't understand the pro-life arguments.
So he does a very good job of articulating why you are infringing on the right of listeners when you have these protests on college campuses and so forth to shut down speakers, and that how you're depriving yourself of hearing the wrong view so you can check whether your position is, whether you think that is testing your position on something. So here's another clip from the same video by Nadine. This is Nadine Strossen, who was a former president of the ACLU.
Well, are we going to say that empowering Mark Zuckerberg and the other titans of Silicon Valley to decide that certain speech is untrue, is that actually going to solve our political problems? I think to the contrary, that is as threatening to democracy as it is to individual freedom. Likewise, with respect to so-called hate speech that conveys discriminatory ideas against traditionally marginalized or excluded groups, every hate speech law around the world to this day is disproportionately enforced consistently against the very minority groups who are hoped to be protected.
So she's articulately expressing exactly what woke culture is all about. It is about suppressing speech. There's no question that you want to protect the speech of the woke people as well. They're bound and determined to get people, and this has happened many times, to get people fired from jobs for saying things that 40 years ago would not have really, in my opinion, would not have raised many eyebrows. So 40 years ago, you had sit around and said, hey, there's going to be this invention called the internet. People get on it. They will say things, and this is what they will say. And you can look at the culture back then, many things that would not be thought to be a trigger or to anyone would have been perfectly acceptable. You see, even in old television shows, they will run a warning about, well, these are outdated stereotypes or some words to that effect. This is Jordan Peterson.
Like there's no hate speech. Like anyone with any sense knows that there's hate speech. Who's going to regulate it? Who's going to define it? And I know the answer to that. The last people in the world you would want to. And then we cross another barrier and we allow the government to compel speech for some hypothetically compassionate reason? No way. That's a really bad idea.
But that's exactly what has happened, that a handful of people decide what a vast majority of people are going to say. If you don't toe the line, you'll get canceled or fired. Your life will be ruined. This is a complete violation of what the idea of free speech protections are meant to do. And the people that defend this will do this under the guise of, well, we got to stop hate, which is, I've talked about this before, but that's a very vague concept. I am supposed to stop you from hating. How about you're supposed to do that? Are we supposed to do it? If we're supposed to do it, what does that mean? Criminalizing thought, speech, We're already, I mean, if you commit a crime, it's an action, should be accountable for that. Simply speaking, no, it's not a way, it's not a good way to go through life. Someone makes a mistake even in their speech, mistakes all the time. And there's no benefit of the doubt. There's no do unto others as others would do unto you. This person has to be completely eliminated, squelched, stopped. And the interesting thing, as I point out with the Donald Trump example, it won't really work. It could actually backfire. And by the way, that Jordan Peterson interview, I got that from you can find this on a YouTube channel called ABC Library, sells the title Jordan Peterson, Free Speech and the Right to Offend, short clip. Here's another video from this same channel, Big Think, What are the Limits of Free Speech? This is an academic. His name is Jonathan Zimmerman.
Part of my liberalism is an absolute commitment to free speech. And one of the things I find most upsetting, both at the partisan and at the intellectual level, is the way that free speech has now been cast as a kind of conservative value.
So Mr. Zimmerman's, or I guess he's a professor, he proclaims to be a liberal. That's his political ideology. He wears that proudly. He's saying that this concerns him, that this is being labeled now, the free speech protection, as something that is coming from not the left, but the right, which is, and the reason he's concerned about this is because he is a liberal. He's on the left. So that's the reason. How can you not say that speech, conservatives or Republicans, has been squelched? I mean, I just cited the most famous example. He's a staunch defender of free speech, but I doubt he's ever said a word about, and I could be wrong, that he said, but many liberals have not stuck up for President Trump. It's only for speech that they agree with. And as an example of this, I'd like to, this is actually something Professor Jonathan Zimmerman wrote recently. This is from WashingtonMonthly.com. This is an op-ed by Jonathan Zimmerman, written March 12, 2022. The headline, The Wars on Free Speech. Within this, he writes, closer to home, dozens of GOP-led state legislatures are considering or having passed measures limiting school and university instruction about race and sexuality, most notoriously for Florida's recently enacted Don't Say Gay law bars classroom discussions of sexuality and gender identity in public primary schools. Several other states have restricted discussions of the 1619 Project and critical race theory, which have become touchstones for Republican censors. Laws increasing penalties for public protesters are proliferating too. Okay, he's not talking about protected speech. These teachers, it's a kind of common sense that they can't just talk and teach about any subject and any topic that they want to. There's plenty of examples of this. For example, political campaigning. Most parents don't want that. It would be inappropriate for a teacher to proselytize, and most parents don't want their children exposed to teachings of religion in public schools. There's just a whole host of things. The interesting thing about this, if you go on Facebook or you go on social media, they talk about this law that he's referring to, you'll read incredibly intolerant comments. For example, if a child asks an adult a question on sexual orientation and that child is under the age of 10 years old, what in the world, I mean, I can't imagine initiating a conversation like that with a child. But if the child asks a question, what in the world would be wrong with telling the child that is really a question for your parental authority, whoever they might be, and then do everything you could to inform the parent that the child was inquiring about this? Because the parent would want to know if the child is inquiring about this, wouldn't they? Don't they have the right to know this? So you turn your kids over to schools, you'd actually want teachers discussing this topic? How would they do it? Are they supposed to teach the topic, or are they supposed to just, well, if the child asks, I'm allowed to respond in any way I want to? That is not what most parents want. Teachers are employed by school systems. And at the end of the day, the parents get to decide what or ought to decide what their children will be taught in public schools. This Mr. Zimmerman is, I'm sorry, but he says some other things in this article that make a lot of sense and do defend free speech. He's absolutely correct that college campuses are shooting the liberal media. The liberal media and liberal academics as well are shooting themselves in the foot by pushing this idea that, well, you do have free speech, but there are consequences to your speech, which means you get your life ruined if you don't toe the line. So there's been many polls on this. Many people are are very guarded about what they have to say, and that's not conducive to having any sort of civilized society when people are so afraid to say whatever they want to, and then you have you're all talking in different channels. For example, the Truth Social, that platform, I don't know what it'll be like, but everybody's in their own little, compartment, which may be perfectly fine. But this will be primarily because leftists don't like hearing other views. They're extraordinarily intolerant of this idea, especially with this Florida bill. Very interesting that a child under the age of 10, they think it's perfectly okay to have these conversations with them, and they want the door wide open, and if you don't believe that, you are a bigot. And that's how that goes. Really being tolerant of other people when you resort to this ad hominem attacks over just simply, I'm the parent, that's not appropriate. There's a bunch of things that are not appropriate. And so Mr. Zimmerman, in an effort to say, well, to reclaim or somehow soften the idea that this is now, I don't know that liberals 50 years ago were that much different than conservatives about protecting free speech. I mean, you look at the speeches of Barry Goldwater or the actions of Barry Goldwater and Ronald Reagan, and they were completely in favor of the First Amendment and protecting what it stood for. That's my different take on the subject of the First Amendment and how important it is. I think it's obviously important. And I really appreciate you watching. Please subscribe, like, share. Love to see your comments. If you disagree with me, I'd love to hear that. And we have episodes every Tuesday and Thursday. And thank you for watching.